On September 10, 2025, America lost one of its boldest defenders of liberty. Charlie Kirk, founder of Turning Point USA, was assassinated during a student event in Orem, Utah. Kirk wasn't just another conservative voice. He was a fighter for free speech, a warrior for the next generation, and a man who refused to bow to the woke mob. His death sent shockwaves through the conservative movement. Vigils erupted across the nation. College students carried candles, veterans saluted his memory, and church bells rang in towns that knew exactly what Charlie stood for: a vision of America rooted in faith, freedom, and patriotism. But even in the midst of grief, as families mourned and conservatives honored his sacrifice, the elite class couldn't help themselves. They saw opportunity where others saw tragedy. In Hollywood, among the smug late-night comedians, one voice in particular sharpened the knife. That voice belonged to Jimmy Kimmel. And just 5 days after Kirk's death, instead of showing an ounce of decency, Kimmel opened his ABC stage with venom. His words weren't comedy. They were contempt, directed not at extremists, not at radicals, but at everyday Americans who simply love their country. The question is, how far would he go? On September 15th, Jimmy Kimmel stood before his late-night audience and spat out words that will be remembered as the moment his career began to unravel. His exact line was chilling in its cruelty. "We hit some new lows with the MAGA gang, trying to turn this into their martyr moment." Think about that. A man is assassinated, a husband, a leader, a mentor to countless young Americans, and Kimmel calls his supporters a gang, mocking them for grieving. This wasn't satire. It wasn't some edgy joke. It was raw disdain, dripping with the elitist arrogance that has infected Hollywood for years. The crowd in his studio laughed nervously, but millions watching at home did not. Social media lit up instantly. Conservatives, independents, even moderates who had respected Kirk's dedication to students recoiled. How could a network host use the assassination of a political activist as material to ridicule the very people in mourning? And this wasn't just another off-color quip. It was a broadcast megaphone blasting venom into the culture war, exposing what so many Americans already suspected. Hollywood doesn't just disagree with conservatives, they despise them. By that night, outrage was spreading like wildfire. But the backlash was only beginning, and the response would hit harder than anyone expected. The very next day, conservative leaders wasted no time calling Kimmel's remarks exactly what they were: vile hate speech. Senator Ted Cruz went on Fox News, visibly furious, saying, "This isn't comedy, this is hate," broadcast on national television, mocking the death of a young conservative leader. ABC should be ashamed. Representative Matt Gaetz followed, calling the monologue a direct attack on millions of Americans who respected Charlie Kirk and the values he stood for. The Fox News primetime lineup united around the story, with hosts labeling Kimmel's words the ugliest example yet of liberal media contempt. The network didn't just highlight the insult, it hammered the bigger picture. Late-night TV has become a pulpit for left-wing activists, not comedians, and now that bias had crossed into open cruelty. Behind the scenes, advertisers started pulling out. According to Fox Business, at least 20% of companies tied to Nexstar affiliates began freezing their contracts within 48 hours. This wasn't a grassroots boycott. It was corporate America calculating that Kimmel had finally crossed the line of profitability. And while ABC tried to remain silent, the firestorm grew. Viewers were demanding answers. Congressmen were demanding accountability. The walls were closing in, and Kimmel's bosses at Disney could no longer ignore the storm gathering at their doorstep. On September 17th, at precisely 4:30 p.m. Eastern, the hammer dropped. ABC announced that Jimmy Kimmel was being suspended indefinitely. No timeline, no promises of a return, just an open-ended exile. Disney executives quickly confirmed the decision, making it clear that pressure from advertisers had left them with no choice. The statement was sterile, but the message was unmistakable. Kimmel was radioactive. This wasn't a quiet move behind the scenes. It was a very public suspension, and it sent shockwaves across the industry. For years, late-night hosts like Kimmel had mocked conservatives with impunity, painting themselves as untouchable kings of cultural commentary. But this time, the rules changed. Advertiser dollars spoke louder than Hollywood arrogance. And the financial fallout was real. Industry insiders revealed on OANN that the drop in sponsor support was not a temporary hiccup, it was a full-blown collapse. Executives reportedly admitted off record that Kimmel's career was likely over. Think about that. Decades of building a brand destroyed in a matter of days, not by some scandal hidden in the shadows, but by his own words broadcast to millions. And yet, as devastating as the suspension was, the storm was far from over. By the next morning, another voice of authority stepped forward to make the situation even worse for Jimmy Kimmel. By the morning of September 18th, the fallout reached Washington. FCC Chair Brendan Carr appeared on Newsmax, delivering a statement that cut like a knife. He didn't couch his words. He said Jimmy Kimmel's remarks were inciting division, and that this kind of rhetoric on broadcast television was a disgrace to the public trust. When the top regulator of American airwaves condemns a host, it isn't just a slap on the wrist, it's a career death sentence. Carr emphasized that the FCC does not regulate speech itself, but he pointedly reminded networks that they hold broadcast licenses contingent on serving the public interest. The implication was obvious. If ABC continued giving Kimmel a platform, they were endangering their credibility and possibly their standing with regulators. That message alone made advertisers even more nervous, accelerating the pullouts already underway. Meanwhile, Breitbart reported that Kimmel's ratings had cratered almost overnight, plunging lower than any late-night program in recent memory. The audience that once tuned in for monologues and mockery had vanished, leaving behind a PR disaster. The narrative was shifting rapidly. This wasn't just one host making an ugly comment. It was exposing a sickness in Hollywood's treatment of conservatives. And the pressure to hold him accountable was now bipartisan in its momentum, with Republicans sensing a pivotal cultural victory. Breitbart's reporting wasn't the only voice hammering Kimmel's collapse. The Daily Wire dug deeper, framing the entire episode as part of a broader pattern, what they called the left's relentless assault on allies of Donald Trump and the conservative movement. They argued this wasn't about one tasteless monologue. It was about a cultural elite that seeks to delegitimize anyone who dares to stand for faith, family, and freedom. Charlie Kirk's assassination became, in their analysis, another flashpoint in a long war waged against conservative icons. According to their coverage, Kimmel's sneering remarks weren't a one-off slip. They were proof of how deeply Hollywood's disdain runs. They tied his words directly to a media machine that has spent years belittling Trump supporters, mocking prayer, and vilifying patriotism. This, they said, is why so many young conservatives rallied around Kirk in the first place, because he represented resistance to exactly this kind of cultural condescension. The Daily Wire didn't mince words. Kimmel's fall from grace was overdue. And in conservative circles, his suspension wasn't seen as an isolated event. It was viewed as the first crack in a larger wall of left-wing hypocrisy. A reckoning had begun, and Hollywood could feel the ground trembling beneath its feet. Even Republican leaders began weighing in, recognizing what this moment symbolized. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis praised ABC's move, calling it a small but necessary blow against a media establishment that has operated with unchecked bias for far too long. His words echoed across conservative media. This wasn't just about Kimmel losing a job. It was about accountability finally reaching into the gilded halls of Hollywood. For years, late-night hosts had positioned themselves as moral arbiters, quick to condemn Republicans as backwards, cruel, or unworthy of public life. Yet when a conservative leader was murdered, the mask slipped. Kimmel's laughter wasn't just inappropriate. It revealed the contempt elites harbor toward anyone who challenges their ideology. And for once, there were consequences. Donors, advertisers, and even network executives realized they could no longer hide behind the claims of just comedy. The marketplace spoke, the audience walked away, and Republican voices made sure the nation knew what happened. Kimmel wasn't just suspended, he was exposed. But exposure leads to another question, the one looming over Hollywood today. If Jimmy Kimmel can fall, who else might be next? Jimmy Kimmel's downfall is more than the story of one late-night host losing his stage. It's a turning point. For decades, conservatives warned that the media's open hostility toward them would eventually go too far. September 2025 proved them right. From Charlie Kirk's assassination to Kimmel's vile attempt to sneer at grieving Americans, to the tidal wave of outrage that stripped away his advertisers, his audience, and now his career. Every step revealed a truth long ignored. The elites do not represent America. Kirk will be remembered as a defender of liberty, a man who stood tall against censorship and indoctrination. Kimmel will be remembered for mocking his death and paying the price for it. And in that stark contrast, millions of Americans saw hope, that accountability is possible, that cultural power can shift, that truth still has a voice. As of this morning, September 18th, there are no signs of reversal, no whispers of a comeback, only silence from Hollywood and celebration from conservatives who know the fight isn't over, but just beginning. Because Jimmy Kimmel's cancellation isn't the end of a career. It's the first sign that the tide is turning against the bias that has poisoned American media for far too long.